Alrighty, let's see. Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on stream. I one of these days have to get a cord that's long enough so I can actually sit up straight when I do Handmade Hero. Because it's like this thing doesn't go far enough and I'm constantly, it's really annoying. I wish I didn't have this weird like tether to. It's like I barely can move my head at all when I'm doing Handmade Hero, and it really, I don't like it. Let's put it that way. It's really, really annoying. It's like the annoyingest of things, but yeah, that's just the way it goes sometimes. So I should do that. That's what I should do for Christmas. I should get some way of actually having, since I do this every night for 2 hours, I should have some way of like actually not hating it the entire time. It seems like it should be pretty easy to do, but who knows? Maybe it's not. Of course, it would have been a lot easier if I could have plugged it into the front microphone port, but if you remember way back at the original Handmade Hero when we started, I had it plugged into the front microphone port, and of course the front microphone port, for whatever reason, when captured through OBS, has like clicks in it. How that's even possible, I don't know, but that's just how it was. So welcome to Microsoft Windows and the PC, where everything is unreliable. It's always fantastic. Anyway, doesn't really matter. Point being, we are here today on day 227. We are going to do some work on our attract mode, basically getting in and out of the game, and some other things like that we kind of wanted to, just clean up a little bit. I was sort of pulling things out and separating out different pieces of the game code into places where they were kind of logically isolated from each other. So that we could sort of go like, okay, if I want to, I can start up, a cutscene, and that's all self-contained. I can start up, a game world, and that's all self-contained, and I could switch between them and do stuff like that. All of those sorts of things. That's really all I was interested in doing, and we did it mostly. But we didn't quite have time to finish yesterday, and so that's what I'm going to finish today. If you would like to follow along at home and you pre-order the game at handmadehero.org, day 226 is the source code you want to start with here on day 227. So that is what I am doing as well. All right, so off we go. Let's take a look at what we have left ourselves with. And I believe what we did is we basically had everything pulled out, but we just didn't have a chance to sort of finish the last few things. So we don't have any way of actually starting the game now because we pulled out that piece. So we come to the cutscene, and that actually works just fine, and that starts playing. So that all got pulled out and is reasonable. But if I wail on the spacebar, which should be starting, should launch a hero into the game, nothing happens. And I can't hit escape to quit anymore, right? All of that stuff, all of the interface that would have been running is now gone. And so I gotta fix that. I also wonder, why is this scene not zooming at all? Do we know why that is? I noticed that yesterday, and I was wondering if we accidentally deleted the zoom from that one scene. Right, because, we've got it here where we've got our intro shot, and this is shot 2, but it should be zooming, right? I mean, that's the zooming right there. It goes from 0, 0, 0 to 5, -5, -1, right? That's how that's set up to zoom. But why do we not see anything? It's a little weird, right? Just a little weird. So I don't really know what's going on there, but what I would like to do is I'd like to figure out what happened to it. And if we take a look here, we've got hero and tree, wall and window, and icicles. They're all at obviously very different levels, whatever you want to call that. They're different, very different Z depths. So I don't feel like it should be as stationary as it is. And what's weird about that is basically all the other shots seem to work exactly correctly, right? Like nobody else has that problem. So I guess one thing I could do is I could drastically inflate what the actual DT was, just to verify that it's not moving, or at least to exacerbate it a little bit and just see if we can sort of tease it out at all. So there's us zoom in. Okay, so basically it is still zooming in. I guess it's just so subtle that you don't see it. So I wonder if maybe that's something we should probably, just exaggerate a little bit, just try to make that a little bit more dramatic as it zooms in, because it just does seem like maybe that's not sufficient. That's just a little bit too slow for whatever reason. So I don't know. Like, let's say I cranked that up to something where I was actually just gonna double that rate, for example. And this is probably not worth playing with at the moment, but I'm just curious to see if that gives a little bit more motion there. And probably what we'll have to do at some point is maybe, you know what I'll do is when we actually go back to sync this stuff up with voiceover, with like a soundtrack that goes with the cutscene. When we do that, I'll go back to that second scene and I'll see if I can make it a little more, a little more dramatic. And so now you can sort of see it moving, but it's still really pretty darn subtle. So I feel like that'll probably have to be, just made a little bit more pronounced even than what it is there. So I don't know, something like that. I'm not sure, but anyway. So point being, what we need to do at this point in order to get ourselves back to sort of where I want us to be is we need to think about how we're going to handle UI during these various pieces. And I think what I probably will do is say that, I don't really want to handle much UI during the cutscene attract mode stuff. Yeah, so it looks like that's zooming in okay now, but I feel like maybe the boy is he's just a little bit too, he has too much motion. He should probably be set back a little bit more. Sorry to keep jumping in and out here. I don't know why. It was just bugging me. I don't like it when things are not just so. Yeah, so anyway, point being, I wonder if the hero and the tree need to be a little bit more pushed to the background, if that makes sense. So I don't really know exactly what the right way to do that would be, but, something like this, I guess. Anyway, sorry, what I was trying to say was, like, I don't think I really want to handle much in the way of UI during the cutscene attract mode stuff. Because the only thing that really needs to happen is if somebody tries to start the game, it needs to go into the game mode, right? But that seems to be just like the only real... I really don't feel like there's anything else that has to happen. And once you're in the game mode, then that'll do its thing and it's all fine. Okay, so that's actually looking better, but I think even a little bit further back than that would be good. But so, I feel like that's something that can just be handled without it being too much of a big deal, where just anything that gets hit, we immediately switch over to the game mode, and the game mode will handle like player joining and stuff like that. Because I want, if we ever allow multiple players for real in the shipped game, which I don't know if we will, if we turn that off or not, because we'll have to see if it makes any sense to have two players in the game at all. But so if you have two different people, then what I'd like to do is I would kind of like to have it so that you could join at any time. So I need the like fundamental concept that someone could join the game. That needs to like be in there at all times. It's not modal. Like, joining a game can't be something that's dependent, right, on you being in the cutscene. It's got to be something that's always going to work, right? And so that's why I say, I really want to make sure that that part is handled in the game world. So I think what I want to do is leave all the interface there, and then the only interface that I'll put inside this, the cutscene attract mode is just if anybody hits their start button, it immediately pops to the game world, and it lets the game world probably handle the UI stuff that it's going to do at that point, something like that. All right, so that looks a lot better to me, by the way. I feel like we're getting much closer now to something usable. So again, I don't need to deal with that now. It's fine as it is, but now at least you can kind of see the motion a little bit better. And it's not, totally awful or anything. So yeah, let's see here. Also, this needs to be a little bigger, and this might want to, yeah. Excuse me. So all right, so that's what I'm going to do. And after I quit fixating on the fact that this is wrong, I probably should have, if I wasn't talking, I would have gone and made it so that we could just optimize that one scene by itself really quickly. But yeah, like I said, I'm going to stop fixating on it immediately after I see if that made the size of the dude right here. And that's all. That's all. You know, I just want to see. That's all. Just a little. You know, I just wanted to have a little looky-loo at it. All right, so he's kind of a little bit off center, but other than that, he's fine. So I'll just say, let's just say that we move him over a little bit, like maybe like that, and we'll just leave it like that. Okay, so now that we've got our cutscene fixation out of the way for today, let's suppose that I go ahead in here and I do track mode, and oh, forgot about this. We have a track mode, but we don't actually want it, so let me delete that file. Forget a track mode, pretend that wasn't there. What we actually want is cutscene, here we go, which we're already in. And so when we're in here and we're doing update and render cutscene or update and render title screen, really in here, I guess the other thing that we need to do is like we need to have the title screen, right? That's got to be there. And we've got to have the cutscene and the title screen both, when they do their updating, check for input. And so I'm just going to have a thing, since they're both the same, I'm just going to do a thing that's like check for start or something like that. That's it. And all that's going to do is it's going to do, like, you know, at the end, it's going to have this sort of thing where it goes ahead and does the checking. So I'm going to have a thing that's like check for start. So after it does that, it's just going to look to see if it needs to do anything with that. So both of these guys would do it. And what that means is that, okay, we just have to look for just a subset of buttons that would do that. And so if I look at Handmade, I guess it's world.cpp. Oops, I think it's world mode, rather. If we look at Handmade world mode, we have this whole big block of stuff, right? And we've got the part that actually checks for that start condition. And that's, let's see, that is, where is that? There's a button for it, right? Or did we leave it in here? We left it in here. So here's that code. And you can kind of see that all we're really doing is spinning over the controllers, and we're seeing whether or not anyone pushed the start button. And there's also the quit button. So I should actually call this check for meta input or something. And that would essentially just do this part of it. So all it's going to do is say, okay, for each of these guys, I just want to know if you pressed either of these two things, whichever one it was, I am going to want to take some action, right? I'm going to want to take some action on that. And depending on what the action is, I'm going to do something. In the case of someone pressing the back button on the controller, we want to quit. We want to exit out. And in the case of somebody pressing start, in fact, I guess I can do this as well. In the case of somebody pressing start, I want to start the game. And that's really all we need to do. That would check all of the input that is allowed during the metagame. And so now these two guys can do that. So all we really need to do is figure out what action we're going to take. If somebody presses the start button, then what I'm going to want to do is in Handmade World, I feel like we've got you know, this sort of like play world function. What I want to do is do play world so that we actually have a world that gets started up. And then once we do play world, I want to be able to add like a player, right? I want to actually initialize whoever the player is that started the game. So in here we would have something like, okay, you know, we've got play world, so we'll call that. So we'll just be like, hey man, play whatever you're going to play, like do it. And we're going to need that game state, obviously. So game state. That will necessitate that sort of being passed here, like so. Game state. Yeah. Oops. And that way, when someone presses that controller button, you know, off you go. Now, quit requested. I don't actually remember how we were handling that, but so I'm going to just check really quickly how that happens. So that accesses the game memory and says that you want to quit the thing. So in order to do that, I don't really know. I don't really know if I love that concept. I want to see something about that. Is quit requested best put here, or is it best put in game input? And I don't know, right? Because we don't really have a concept of where that sort of thing should go. But it does kind of seem like it might be more appropriate in here. I'm not sure. I don't really know. But that way you wouldn't pass the game memory around for no reason like that. Because you know you would be dealing with the game input, presumably, in order to do it. So I don't know. I don't know what I think about that. But I think I might just move it there for now. And so then I'm going to say that quit requested equals true if anyone tries to quit the game. And that's all we're really going to do. Now, as soon as we do one of these things, we're going to break out of this loop because we only want to process the first piece of input because that's going to change the mode immediately at that point, and we don't want to process any further input. I think what we'd rather do is let somebody else process the input from there, right? So one way to do it, in fact, you know, and I think I might do this. I think I might do it this way directly because this kind of sounds good to me. Is Handmade world mode. That's got update and render world. I may just go ahead and say, you know what? Let's just let, you know, in the case where this meta input happens, let's just let the other mode handle the input, right? So, you know, let's let it do one frame of that or whatever it's going to do. Now, I don't really know because we're going to have rendered the cutscene. So what I could do, I don't even know. Like maybe what we could do is something like this, where we do like check for meta input, like so. And, you know, maybe we even do something where we're like, okay, we see if we get anything, and if we decide to change the mode, then we don't actually do any of our work, right? So we check for meta input, and if there was some meta input and we wanted to change the mode, we don't do like our rendering. Instead, maybe we punt and let the next person render, like whoever was going to render gets to do that, right? Gets to do that separately. So I'm not sure. But like imagine something like that were going to happen. So if something like that were going to happen, then what I might say is like, okay, we want to do something where like, you know, we do play world and then we would do update and render world or something like that. So maybe we've got something, maybe we even make this somewhat systemic. So it does something like, okay, in handmade.cpp, when we do our little dance here where we look at what the game mode is and we do whatever we're going to do, maybe I do something that's like actually going to loop, and it'll like, it can punt during a change in type. It can go ahead and rerun the thing a second time or whatever. So I don't know exactly how I'd want to do that. Maybe, you know what I could do is something like this. I could say rerun equals false, and then I could do like rerun, you know, equals whatever. And so anytime someone wants to change the mode, they can just go ahead and do that, and they don't have to worry, right? So that would be like, okay, update and render cutscene, update and render title screen. Essentially, it just says like, you know, like this, like so on. So yeah, if we see that we got some input that would cause us to change the mode, then we let people know that, and off we go. So that should be good, I think. Not sure. Okay, and on quit requested, I guess that doesn't change the mode, so we don't pass result true in that particular case. Yeah, so imagine if you did something like this, and you're just like, okay, you know, while rerun, something like that. Seems reasonable. You know, it's not the weirdest thing in the world. And so if I grab this stuff out now, this stuff could all go into Handmade World mode, which is I think which is where I would prefer that it was. I believe. I don't actually know where the best place for it is, but you know, maybe it belongs in here or something like that. And so here in Controlled Heroes, like I was saying, I don't really know where that should live just yet. I don't know if Controlled Heroes should only live in the game world stuff. I don't think so. I feel like Controlled Heroes should probably stay in the game state because it might persist across different things. So I'm just going to assume that that's actually what we want, and I want to pass the game state to this so that it can sort of play with that. All right, so let's take a look here at what we've got. Excuse me. Add player actually takes the world mode now, so that's how that goes. These volume guys, change volume. I don't know where that stuff actually exists. I assume that's in here, but I'm not sure. Let's take a look. Change volume. It is. So if we're calling change volume on the audio state stuff, that just looks like maybe we need to make sure that that is included first. So that's just I think that's just an include order thing. The audio should probably be much higher. It should probably be up with like the assets because that's a pretty core function that everyone's going to call, I would assume. All right, so let's keep it going. So here we are with Playworld. Playworld is something that we would have to sort of expose, I suspect, for people to call. So I'm just going to move that up into the H file so that everyone can see it, anyone who wants to start a world playthrough. But apparently that's not working, and I don't know why. Oh, I do know why. That is because I don't know where Handmade Cutscene is actually placed. Again, this is the kind of thing that's just so annoying. You know, this stuff should not actually be something that anyone ever worries about. It's super annoying to have to manage dependencies. It's like, because it's literally just busy work. Like, it's something the compiler should have always done for you. It's really just stupid. Anyway, point being, let me see here why we can't get to that Playworld. So here's Handmade. Oh, let me just take a look. Here's Handmade Cutscene.cpp. So Handmade Cutscene.cpp is right here. And of course, that included Handmade.h. So Handmade.h, we know, includes Handmade World, right? Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's the problem. I mean, Handmade World mode's right there. And isn't that where I put that play? It's right there. So why can't it get that? What am I missing? Play World Game State. Since there a missing bracket before semicolon. Ah, okay. So that wasn't dependencies at all. That was just like closing the parens. All right, good. Let's see what else we got here. Input, we don't actually get in this particular function, but we're going to need it. If that makes sense. So let's put that in there. And then we just have to make sure we pass everything that we actually said we were going to pass to these guys so that they can run themselves, which is always good. Okay, update and render world is in here. Update and render world. That takes a B32. The B32 is like, I don't really know what this is going to be, like reselect, whatever that is. So we gotta have a way, I guess, of exiting out. Return result. Which before we were doing with like if there were no heroes, right? So there was like a heroes exists thing. And so what we could do now is say, okay, when we get down to the end here, we could do a thing that's like if heroes exist. Well, if heroes exist, we don't have to do anything. If heroes don't exist, then what we need to do is switch back to the cutscene. or whatever. So we'd want to do play intro cutscene, for example. And we want to, you know, we want to kind of switch what state we're in. And so in that case, the result, well, we don't really need to rerun it for any particular reason. So we should be fine there. So play intro cutscene, identifier not found. That again is because we don't now have, this is the dependency thing that I was actually talking about before, but that turned out to not actually the problem, is now actually the problem. So we've kind of got the intro cutscene thing that we've got to now loft up to the outside, which is fine. Let's go ahead and find all the things it needs. Yeah, update and render title screen must return a value. Right, you are, and there is that value. And so must you. And check for meta input as well. So there we go. Quit requested is not a member of game memory. That is true, and that is because I went ahead and moved it. All right. So now we just got to get this stuff actually working, which of course will take a bit. So let's see. Where are we at? We are currently kicking off something with a totally bogus pointer to a world mode, which is not great, yeah, as you would expect. So when we do fill ground chunk, for some reason it looks like we're passing a bogus world mode there. At least that appears to be the case. So what exactly, you know what I just realized? What exactly is that even, who actually does that stuff? I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't really know who's in charge of those things. Yeah. To be honest, the ground chunk stuff, I realized as I was working on a bunch of design stuff to send art things to Yangshin, I realized that the ground chunk stuff, I don't know if we ever actually need it, because there were some reasons why I don't know that that's actually ever going to be used, but we should debug it anyway, even though I may yank it because I don't know that we actually ever want to do it. So there is that. Anyway, so yeah, one of the things that's a little bit annoying about that is we're going to have to, when we do the mode switching, we're going to have to take into account the fact that there can be people using the world mode when we like exit out, right? Like when you exit world mode or when you close down a world, any like any threaded work that's still going on behalf of that world specifically would have to get shut down, right? Because you can't delete all of the memory that's being used to render the world into the ground chunks. You can't, you know, that if those things are still accessing that memory, when you get rid of it, they will go nuts, right? I don't know that that's what we're looking at here per se, because we didn't actually try to close down a world, but it's just something worth noting, right? All right, so let's take a look here. Let me turn off. Let's start with one thing at a time since we've made a bunch of changes. Let's just start by not doing any ground chunks. We won't kick off any ground chunk work at all. So instead here, when we do like fill ground chunk, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that. Right, so now we're not doing any of that at all. And so now if I go ahead and run, we can just see like where we're at with everything else. Okay, so this is a little bit better because now I can see what's actually happening, which is what I would like. Okay, so this is easy, right? We've never actually done the initialization of the world arena, and so that's obviously got to happen. We can't push the struct before we call initialize world. That's kind of obvious. So yeah, so we got to take care of that. So let's go ahead and reorganize that part. So yeah, world mode world. That should actually probably be on the mode arena, right? Game state. So it allocates the world thing. and then it initializes it all, right? And in some sense, it does seem like maybe that should just be a thing that does its allocation, meaning, you know, when we do initialize world, instead of passing it in a world at that point, it seems like maybe since it's going to have to do a sub-arena thing here anyway, it seems like you probably would just do the actual, like you just do the actual allocation. So, you know, we just call create world like this. That seems like maybe a saner thing to do. So then you would just say, oh, okay, you know, we push struct on the parent arena to get the new world, you know, we return it, and we initialize its arena as part of that process, obviously. So then that goes away, and this is a little bit more straightforward now. That seems a little bit more sane to me. Honestly, that you know, that's just a saner thing. All right, so let's see. Create world identifier not found. That is true because I actually forgot to rename it from initialize world to create world. So now we have a way to create a world, and that's great. Everyone's happy, and it's fine. All right, so let's keep going with the debugging process here. So let's see. When we do create world, we call subarena. Subarena asks for some stuff, and we then say that we can't fit it, is basically what happened. That could be due to the alignment, but I'm not actually sure. So let's take a quick look and see if that is true. Let's see if we have handmade get size effect remaining. Yeah, so that's a problem. That was basically a case of us not using our define everywhere, probably because we added the define a little bit too late. But yeah, we would obviously want to make it so that they always look for the correct default alignment there. And the other thing was that looked like it was set to 16 though. So did somebody ask, did Handmade World ask for a different alignment than the normal alignment when it does its subarena? Like, why did that happen? It looked like it said 16 to me. Am I wrong? Let's try that. I want to see that again. I felt like that said 16. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Yeah, the alignment's 16. So how is the alignment 16? I don't get it. So subarena takes a default parameter. I must be going blind. Didn't I just... Ah, no, okay. So I missed one more. That's the problem right there. All right. That's what should have happened. Didn't happen, but should have happened. And so if we want to do a subarena of size 16, which, you know, maybe we do, maybe we don't, but if we did want to do that, we would have to ask for it specifically, which is what we want because we need to ask for that when we ask for the sizes. So let me make sure that nobody actually really wanted that specifically. That certainly doesn't matter, I don't think. Neither does that. I don't think these guys care too much about this at all. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that nobody actually cares about that alignment being 16. We could change the default alignment to 16 if we wanted to, but yeah. All right, so we're getting a little further here, but you can see that we're still totally messed up. Like, for example, what happened there, I don't know if you saw it, but, you know, this is the game. I hit the space bar, and we've got nothing on the screen. In fact, it restarted the cutscene, which doesn't make any sense. So we kind of want to figure out what's going on there. Oh, well, actually, you know what? I know what's going on there. But anyway, so what we want to have happen is we want to, when we call update and render on the world mode, we want to create a hero. So we need to make sure that that code path is working properly, and then we can kind of get back to whatever we were doing. And in fact, we could also see if the ground chunk updating is actually working now as well. Let's just take a look here. Okay, so that is still busted. The world mode world thing is still kind of busted. Let's see here. So the world mode is just looks garbagey to me. So basically, whenever this fill ground chunk thing gets called, so I'm guessing that what happens is we actually do just straight up exit out of the. We exit as soon as we enter, which means all of those fill ground chunks do exactly what I said they would do. They crash because they're accessing memory that's been freed by the call to play intro cutscene, right? So you can see that heroes exist is set to 0. Now I don't actually know why it's set to 0, because I would have thought that it would have been set to 1. So that's a little confusing to me, and I would probably need to look to see. There it is. That's why. So what has to actually happen is this guy has to match, right? This has to be was pressed, because what was happening there was that it would come in here and it would not have ended down. It would ended up, because what was pressed starts checks for ended up. So the check in the cutscene code was different than the check in this code, and therefore there was a mismatch, right? So yeah. All right. So still not quite there yet. So let's try looking through what happens during the controller thing so we can now actually debug that and figure out why we're not getting any of this. It looks like because heroes exist only happens in this path. That's probably why. So this was pressed adds a player, but nobody actually looks for it yet. And so the way we could fix that is actually pretty easy. That is really just a matter of saying like, oh, okay, just do this again. Like so. Yeah. So, okay. So now at least we're back to something sensible. We can start the game, right? Yeah, we can exit the game as well and go back to our intro cutscene, which is what we wanted. Start again, and so on, hopefully. I don't actually know if that's true. Looks like we still got a bug here. And I also noticed that we do have another bug, which is that when I start the game, I can't move, right? I can tell that time is advancing because like the shadows are bobbing and stuff like that, but I can't actually move my dude around. So that's obviously busted, right? So I'd like to see what's wrong there, but we're pretty close now to having things separated out, which means we can sort of proceed a little bit further. So what I want to do is I want to figure out why when I'm pushing a button I'm not moving my dude, and I don't really. This may have been something that, again, normally if I was going to make all these changes, I'd make them all in one day, where it's easier to keep it in my head. And so it's possible that I just forgot something that I was like, oh, I'm just going to comment this out or something like this, right? It's possible that we just did something like that. And now I'm just forgetting that it needs to be commented back in again, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look for if 0 and see in world mode what we got rid of. Wall is not particularly interesting. Why the hero... This looks like an obvious thing, right? It looks like we just commented out the code for controlling people, which, okay, is exactly what I said we might have done. We did. So here's game state. Let's put that back in there and see what happens. All right. Hey, look. So that was all it was. And now we can move our little hero around, and that's all good. Let's see here. So we also, though, don't seem to be tracking the camera, meaning the camera does not actually seem to be updating. And so I do also wonder if we nuked that code, which we may have, or the code which sets the camera follow, right? Sets who's getting followed by the camera. If that makes sense. And I believe The person who's getting followed by the camera is handled in here, I think. I can't quite remember. Might not be. Let's see. Camera follow. Add player camera follow entity equals little entity low index. Camera following entity index is the thing that I care about. And hey, there it is. So when we look through these guys and we find one of them, we do our camera stuff here and we set up the camera. So that seems like that should all be working. So I'm not sure why it wouldn't be unless camera following entity index is set incorrectly. And so what I suspect, could have happened there, for all I know, we could have a situation where we never initialized any of those things. In fact, now that I think about it, that's another thing that we will have to do, because now we have to clear our stuff to 0 when we start up, because that's our definition of how everything is supposed to work. Everything is supposed to be cleared to 0. And right now, we're not actually doing that, right? We're not actually clearing the stuff to 0 when we allocate it for the first time, and it's expected to be, right? So what I would probably suggest here, and the way that I would normally do this, is I would probably say our push struct should just clear to 0 when we do it, right? So meaning as we push things on, those things should be cleared. And so in handmade.h, right, when I do push struct, what I would do normally is say, okay, whenever we do push size, we would have some kind of flag here that says whether you should clear it to 0 or not. And, the default behavior is that it does get cleared to 0. So let's think about this for a second, how I might want to do this. I'm going to grep for push struct and just take a quick check at how often it's used. So it's not really that common. We don't do very much allocation, as you can see, in general. So it's pretty easy to take a look at the places that we use it and decide which ones of these we want to do clear and which ones of these we don't, right? So that's not a particularly difficult thing to, and not really something we probably have to worry about too much. Okay. So this would be pretty straightforward, right? All we would have to do is after we do our push size, if we want to clear things out, we would just say, after we get the memory, clear from the place where we did the allocation through to its size. And I feel like we actually have a 0 thing somewhere, maybe. Yeah, so we have the concept of a 0 size. So really all we'd have to do when we do a push size is we just call a 0 size after it. That's it. So right here, when we do okay, let's figure out what we're returning, we just do a 0 size of the result and however big that we said that it was, and we don't have to clear the whole thing. We only have to clear the part that they actually asked for. So we could really just clear the size in it, and off we go. So again, the only reason not to just literally do nothing but that, and I'm going to have to grab that from down below and bring it up here. Right. The only reason not to do that, literally exactly that, is because I don't actually know, if there's somebody who does an allocation of a big block of memory who doesn't really want to clear it. I suspect that, for example, the world, when it allocates its, some of its space for storage, may not ever want to actually clear it. So that could be a performance problem, right? And something that we might want to address. So that's all. I'm just pointing that out, right? But yeah. So as you can see, that was exactly the case because we expected that stuff to be cleared to 0 and it wasn't. Now we have it clearing to 0. We're back to where we wanted to be. And we can sort of do exactly what we had hoped for, which is, switching around between different modes of the game, creating worlds and playing in them, and then going back to our metagame, and that all is nice and happy and fun. Now, we do have one problem to address, like I said, we have the fact that the ground chunks are sort of like in theory I should be able to get the ground chunks to crash here. If I just, you know, if I just like start things up and I like run to get the ground chunks going and then clear it, you know, well, all right. So it's, you just have to trust me. I believe it is I believe it is possible to crash because the fill ground chunks are running on a separate thread. They're accessing a world state that can go away. They won't crash immediately necessarily, but they'll start accessing bogus memory, like memory that's being reused for something else. In theory, it might be. It probably isn't getting reused for something else right now, and so that's why it's still working, because it's just using the old memory that's there. But trust me, it's a bug. So we do also want the concept at some point that whatever our modes are, if we do decide that we want these sort of like background tasky things, like if we want the ground chunks there, we would have to make sure that when we shut down a mode, we don't shut it down until we can close down all of its tasks. You know? That's all. We just need to make sure the multi-threading stuff is shut down, right? You can kind of think of it as like, you know, like task-based garbage collection, if you will, right? So instead of thinking of things like memory, we're just thinking of like actual tasks. So this thing has spawned a bunch of tasks, and we can't actually consider it shut down until all of those tasks have finished, right? It's sort of like reference counting is probably the right word. It's not really garbage collection, because garbage collection like searches through a thing. So something like that, but like a reference count, right? So you imagine like a reference counted pointer for memory, something like that. It's sort of like that sort of thing, but with tasks. So we're like, okay, this thing has started n tasks, and it has to wait for those n tasks to finish before it can be considered shut down. So we would want to do that. I don't know that we need to do that yet, because it's not really necessarily the best time to do it. We could, or we could leave it. So I'm not sure. But if we got fill ground chunk here, I'm going to go ahead and jump over there to note it, because at the very least we got to make sure that we know. So this is like to do Casey, important, right? Something like this. I don't know how I want that. Maybe like this. It's probably the right way. Fill ground chunk work will cause a crash if the mode goes away before the task finishes. This must be shut down properly if we ship it. Okay. So yeah, like I said, it's probably pretty hard to get it to crash, but trust me, it could crash if you did the stuff correctly. If you did the right set of things, I think it could crash. All right. So yeah, I guess what I would say now is I kind of want that title screen to happen. So what I would like to do is maybe start to figure out how that's going to work. I don't really know how that's going to work, but you know, like we just need something where it's going to show like a title screen, some kind of attract mode-y thing, right? And I probably should have asked Yangshin to draw us one, but I hadn't thought of it yet, so I didn't. But point being, when we have the cutscene, when we do update and render cutscene, we're going to get to a point where the cutscene is complete, right? And that's this thing right here. So if the cutscene is complete, I don't know why that was set to if not cutscene complete. Render cutscene at time. This is actually the wrong thing. It's not cutscene complete. It's cutscene still running. It's cutscene incomplete, right? Because it's set to false, and then it becomes true if we found something, So yeah, cutscene still running maybe is the best phrase. So that was just wrong terminology. That was the exact opposite of what it actually was. All right, so we've got cutscene still running. And so what we want to do is say, like, all right, if the cutscene is not still running, then what I'd like to do is switch to play title screen. You know? So at the end of the title screen, I mean, at the end of the cutscene, it'll switch to the title screen, and it'll do its thing. And I'd like to do the same thing with the title screen, which is to say that the title screen will stay up for like 10 seconds or something, and then it will go back to the intro cutscene or something like that, right? And so, yeah, let's say that, you know, we go through here, we check for meta input, we do something where we're like, I don't know what's happening, something is happening, and so then we say, like, okay, you know, render cutscene at time, this sort of exact thing happens, right? So it basically says, like, okay, title screen t plus equals input dt for frame. So we accumulate time, and of course we'll just always check when we're doing that. We'll say if the title screen t is greater than the 10-second time that we said that we want it to be, then we'll go and switch to the intro cutscene, right? Something like that. So yeah, starting to get roughly to where I want, but there's still one more big change, and in fact I could sort of show you why there's a big problem that we still have to sort of address, and maybe I'll do that in the last couple seconds here. We've got about 5 minutes left, so let me just do this part first, and then I can show you the thing that I think we still want to do before we consider this part of the game sort of in a reasonable state. What I would like to do first is I'd like to verify that we're actually making our update and render title screen thing, that's actually working. So I'm going to put a clear in here so that when we are doing this thing, we can see like a red screen or something, right? So we clear it out, and that's all good. Okay, cutscene's still running. So what I'm going to do just to make sure so we can kind of test that is I'm going to go ahead and run it, and I'm going to run it in the reverse order. So when we initialize this first, instead of play intro cutscene, I'm going to do play title screen so I can see that part of it working, and then we'll kind of go from there. All right, so we fade out, and now we've got this. This is our title screen, quote unquote, right? And after it's up for 10 seconds, it should switch to the intro cutscene, which it does. And so now we've got both modes going, and hopefully, you know, we could speed this up a little bit just to make sure. Where's our DT at? Let's see. Right here. We could go ahead and speed that up so it doesn't take so long, if that makes sense. Whoa. What happened there? I don't know. Cutscene's still running. We're cutscene at time. I don't know why changing that would have had that effect. Oh, yes I do. So the thing that I said I would show you in a couple after I was done with this, I actually showed you just now. So the thing that I was trying to say that I think is busted that we want to fix is if you think about what's happening here, right now, because of the way that we happen to be doing our modes, only one mode exists at any time, which means that inside a particular mode, once you switch to a new mode, you can't ever do anything else, right? Because the instant I try to access like this cutscene T, for example, it's actually wrong. There is no more cutscene, right? Because I might have gotten rid of the whole cutscene structure right here. that make sense? And so what I would like to do as one more step in the process is make it so we can have multiple of these existing at once, so that when we create a new one that we're going to switch to, we don't switch to it immediately, we delay until we're done processing this whole thing, so we don't have to make sure that we only ever do it at the end, right? That's what I would prefer. Now, you can still always structure the code this way, and you wouldn't probably have to worry too much about it, but it's still, like I said, it's not right. Let's put it that way. Anyway, so let's see how this goes. Let's see if we've got more bugs here. I don't actually know that was the bug. I was just noticing the fact that I was like, we have the bug I said I was going to put in. We actually had it already. So we're zooming through the cutscene at 10x speed here, which is, a nice fast forward way to watch. There we go. There we go. And back to the title screen. So good. So now we just need a title screen. But once we actually have a title screen, which we'll do, I don't know, we'll do something, then we're good to go. We can go into the game, presumably. There it is. And we can get out of the game, presumably. There that is. And we can quit. So now we're getting a little further. We're not there yet, but we're getting a little further. So that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and call that for today, because now we've got sort of more of a little bit of a game experience going, and so that's something we can build upon. All right. So let's go ahead and go to the Q&A. Soy Sauce the Kid. Could you leverage your debug code when trying to find the right values you want for intro cutscene in real time instead of recompiling? Yes, we could, although we didn't quite get to the point where the debug code was all finished, right? So that's why I'm not using it, is because we still have more work to do there before we can actually start employing it for any real purpose. Carlino Blue, add some credits and boom, we're done. Yeah, we could just be like, look, that's it, we said there was going to be game, and what we meant by that was that there's like an intro cutscene and some credits, and it's fine. Danny Gwag, how do you terminate or end each thread at the end? At the end of what? At the end of the whole executable? Do you mean when like the game closes? This is Atticus. What are your thoughts on Twitch asking you to switch labels to creative? I do not care. It's their service, and wherever they want to put us is pretty much fine with me. Most people who come to Handmade Hero come because they heard about it from like me on Twitter or somebody else telling them about it. They don't find it through Twitch, so I don't super care where they put us. And so if they think that more people will find it under creative and that's what they would prefer, that's fine with me, because they would know better than I would, and honestly, I don't care. Will we be re-implementing the profiler? Yeah, I mean, when we get to the point where I want that heads up stuff, which is not probably that far away, I want to go finish the debug code thing that we have so we could see it. Danny Gwag, the end of the executable. So when the executable exits, we don't need to close the threads. When the executable exits, we can just immediately close, and we don't really have to do anything, right? What I believe happens when we do quit requested, right? So when we fall out of this loop, the global running loop, what's going to happen is when we come out through here and we do this return 0, we're going to dump into the C runtime library external code, and it's going to call exit process, which will just kill every thread, including ours. So we don't have to do anything to shut down the threads. They're just going to die, and that's it. I just want food. Could you re-explain why you couldn't move the hero after cutscenes for a while? Do you mean just because we had the code commented out? I mean, the only reason was just because we had the code commented out because we hadn't quite ported it over yet. Was the only reason that was happening in this episode. Novin, if someone wants to run your game in full screen but at a different resolution than native, how would they change it? You said before you don't like menus, so would you use a launcher instead or something for those options? So I'm not sure. I would probably prefer it if it could be in like the Steam launcher on Steam, so that when you like play the game, it has a thing that just says how do you want to run it. And part of the reason for that is because I don't really like switching resolutions in the game, because you might, if the game starts up in a resolution that's actually broken, you can't get to the option menu to change it because you can't see anything, right? And so I usually prefer it if you can if there's a setting like that that could potentially break, that could completely break. Then my preference is to have that be settable outside, so that if the user gets themselves into a circumstance where they like cannot recover, right? Then they can fix it. So my preference would be that would be in like the Steam, when you hit like launch on Steam, or you could right click on it in Steam, and you know how Steam has those little things, it's like parameters. My preference would be that it's in there, so if someone wants to change it, they change it. But in general, I would like it to always just run. Meaning, people like a lot of settingsy sort of stuff, and I hate that because I just want the thing to run. And I expect users to not have to care about things like the resolution, so I want the game to like choose the right thing. And the only time that someone should ever even be thinking about that stuff is if they're like a very technical person and want to fuss with things. So like, in my opinion, like command line parameter or like things like that is where that stuff should live. That should not be something that the average person who doesn't know or care what a resolution even is should never be seeing that. They should not be seeing those things in a game. In the same way that when you go to like watch a movie, on Netflix, you don't see these things. They're not there, right? You just push play and it picks the highest resolution your stream can handle. And then if you're somebody who really cares, maybe you can go in and tweak some settings and tell like, oh, don't do that or whatever, right? But I don't like that. Like, I think things should just work, and always. And then if you are somebody who is very technical and wants to tweak things, then I'm all for having tweakable parameters, but they should be in like a very specific technical place that has nothing to do with what the normal person will ever see when they launch the game. Insofar as, could you do some resolution detection at startup to avoid starting at a broken resolution? No. You can't. You have no idea why a resolution might be broken. Like, Windows might be up and running just fine. It may report the monitor as supporting the resolution you're at, but in actuality, the monitor doesn't, and the user is seeing nothing right now, right? So there's really nothing you can do, but what we're doing on Handmade here right now is obviously the safest thing to do, which is always launch in the desktop resolution. Because whoever launched you was looking at a screen that worked, because they had to be or they couldn't have launched you. So that's why I usually prefer always launching at that, whatever the resolution is that the user's running at, you just stay there. Don't change it. Leave it what it is. And then if there's a user who wants, to have all this extra control, right? Then that person should go edit, some kind of config file that is like, okay, just so you know, if you're touching this file, we just expect you know what you're doing, and we're just going to obey whatever you put in there. So go nuts, but we're not responsible for what happens. I prefer that sort of thing. M1E1, let's see, says, you say normal person as if tech-savvy people is something awful. No, not really. They're just not the average case. Maybe I should say average person. Meaning the person who knows what a resolution is not the average person anymore. Like it used to be that if you were someone who played games on a computer, you absolutely knew what a resolution was, right? I mean, like in 1980, there's probably no one playing a game on a computer that could switch resolutions that didn't know what that was, maybe. But nowadays, people might have absolutely no idea what resolution they're even running in. You ask them, like, what's your resolution that you're running in right now? And they might be like, I have no idea, right? And so that's the average case. Like, you know, if someone's playing on their phone or whatever, and it's like, what's the resolution of that phone? They're like, I don't know. Maybe they knew when they picked out the phone because they looked in one on, like, the sticker. It said, like, this is higher resolution than that or something, but, you know. So, yeah. So when I say normal person, what I really mean is average person. Or person who doesn't care about technology. I mean, maybe they are not actually average. Yeah. So the common case should be person doesn't know or care what their thing is running in. They forgot what a resolution was after they went to Best Buy and bought a TV or whatever happened. That was the last time they thought about resolution. And so it doesn't matter, right? So that's the goal, is it just works. As much as possible, it always just works. But, you know, it would be nice, like I said, to have like the ability to create a startup file or pass parameters so that people who want to play around with something, like people who want to force a specific frame rate, want to force a specific resolution, want to force whatever, you know, we can allow them to have that ability to tweak, but that's not going to be in a menu that like people would normally see, right? And yeah, I would agree that I don't think people really know much about resolution other than like, oh, I should get 1080p or is that a 1080p thing or whatever. And the fact that like it's going to get worse because 4K now, like what does that mean? 4K isn't even a resolution as far as I can tell. 4K is like a family of resolutions that are at least double 1080p. But like I've seen different things described as 4K that each have a different resolution. Right? So people say like, oh, that's a 4K monitor. It's like, okay, is it, you know, is it 1920 by 1080 times 4, right? So is it 4 1920 by 1080 screens? Or is it one of these like 5,000 by something that's actually more than 4 1920 by 1080 screens, right? So it looks like there's no more Q colons. So I think I am done. Insobot is going nuts, by the way. Steel Golem, do you generally do cutscene code before gameplay code when you're working on a game? So I guess what I would say is I don't consider cutscene code or game code to necessarily have any particular place in the development timeline. I usually try to sort them by what I think is most appropriate for that project. So for example, let's say that the cutscene art is very labor intensive and needs to get overlapped with the development of the game to a large extent. Then I may do the cutscene code very early to make sure that the cutscene artists know what they're dealing with and there are no surprises, right? But if that was not the case, I may just leave the cutscene code till the very last because if I don't, because it doesn't affect the gameplay and doesn't need to be prototyped or anything like that, then there's no point in doing it early. It doesn't matter, right? So I feel like in general, as a programmer, when you're thinking about what to do when, you need to make sure that for whatever project you're working on, you make the best decision for putting the technology development, getting it out of the way of the art team as much as possible. And that may be doing cutscenes first, it may be doing cutscenes in the middle, it may be doing cutscenes last, who knows, right? And so that's really what the way you should think about it. Not like what's the rule? Do cutscene code first, gameplay code first? Like that's the wrong way to think about it. The right way to think about it is what are the dependencies in this project, and how do I make sure that I schedule my dev time to line up as much as possible with eliminating those dependencies in the order that benefits the game. And so for Handmade Hero, the reason we did the cutscene code now was actually the exact same mentality. I was just thinking to myself, well, what's the thing we could do that's like going to use our renderer and that we could play with here, and that Yangshin could do the art for, that doesn't rely too much on the gameplay, so that she can be working on art productively before we necessarily know certain things about our gameplay that maybe require us to implement them, and so on and so forth, right? Because Handmade Hero is a very odd project because, at an hour a night, the programming goes way slower than the art goes, whereas normally, like, the programming could go way faster than the art. On Handmade Hero, it should really be the other way around, probably. And so, I just sort things more by, like, what works out well for the streaming nature of the show, as opposed to how I would sort it if I knew that I was going to, like, okay, I'm going to do 4 months of programming and do all the code for Handmade Hero, just by myself. How am I going to structure it? I wouldn't, the order in which I do things might be very different, because I might go like, oh, okay, like I'm going to blitz this part of it out and then do this. But like, I really try to make sure that we do things in the order that will make it easiest to learn on the stream, which affects, some of the decisions about major components, right? And what order we do or don't do things in. Was there any other cues I missed? Are we in a point where we're close to need to implement mix-ins? It depends whether we just push on through to the gameplay code now, which we might. And if we do that, then yes. If I decide to go back and finish up a few other things, then possibly not. So I don't know. Pragmascript, will C++ 17 modules solve the include dependency problem? I just always assume that no C++ committee additions to the language will solve any problem, because they never do. In fact, you witnessed exactly what I think of the C++ committee happening on the stream quite literally. The one time we tried to use a new feature, which was decal type, it didn't work, and it didn't work because they spec'd it so poorly that the case we wanted to use it for, it can't be used for, right? And that's my entire thing about the C++ CRP. All they ever do is introduce features that don't actually work, right? And so I don't even bother anymore. So I don't know whether the C++ modules solve the include dependency problem, because I haven't looked at them, but I also know that no, they won't. Because somehow they will do something that makes it so that the average case that a smart programmer would want to use them for, it won't work. They will, I guarantee you, that is what they'll do. Because every time they've ever added a feature to the language, they have managed to do it. No matter how simple that feature should have been, they do it. So yes, I will be shocked to find that is not the case for modules. Pleasantly shocked, I suppose, would be what I'd find. But basically the chance of that, I think, is 0%. So, and with that, let's go ahead and and that decal type thing was hilarious, because at least I'm so glad that was captured on stream, because it's like, I always say that, but maybe I'm just exaggerating. It's like, no, it's like you actually saw it. We only tried to use one C++ feature from the new thing on the stream, and it didn't work for this super simple case. Like, all we wanted to do was get the type of something so we could find out how big it was. It's like, it can't do that. It's like, it turns out if you want to use it for that, you have to create like a template to like force it to map it right. It was like, and you're like, yep, that's the C++ standard committee. Don't know how to program and always create things that a real programmer can't actually use without this huge, like, gigantic investment in doing something that should have been like one simple function that worked, right? It's hilarious. I mean, it's hilarious because if you don't laugh at it, you'll cry because it's the language you have to use, and it's, it's incompetently managed. So anyway, enough about that. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you. As always, if you would like to follow along at home, you can always go to handmadehero.org and pre-order the game, which comes with the source code, so that you can play around with it yourself at home. We also have a forum site you can go to if you want to ask questions. It also has an annotated episode guide by some folks in the community who do a fantastic job maintaining it. I don't know if they've gotten their Patreon listed up there or not yet. Here's the episode guide. You can kind of see it here. Yeah, they don't really know how to do marketing, so the Patreon link is like buried in here. Someday I'll go in here and try to pretty this up so you can see it. There should be like a big old link to the Patreon. But anyway, there's an episode guide that's pretty awesome that you should check out. And you can also support it financially if you want. There's, like I said, members of the community who do it. And I take money every month out of the Handmade Hero Patreon to transfer over to that. And also, if that's something that you want to contribute to specifically, you can do so as well. Speaking of that, we do have a Patreon, obviously. And then we also have a tweet bot that tweets the schedule at you. So if you want to know when the series is going to be live, you can always check that out too. And it will be live for the last time in a while tomorrow, Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Unfortunately, I will be away over Christmas break, so I will not have access to the machine and can't stream. So there will be at least a week of downtime, probably a little bit more until I get back to Seattle and can actually stream the series. So for our final stream for a while tomorrow, I hope to see you guys back here for that. We can finish up some of our mode stuff, and then we'll have Christmas break to think about what it is that we're going to implement when we come back, because I guess we'll have to sort of think about that a little bit more. Anyway, that's it for this episode. And of course, I can't actually exit. There we go. I got to exit the taskbar. Until tomorrow, have fun programming, everyone, and I'll see you guys on the internet.